So we have two keynote speakers. First one is François-Régis Letourneau from L'Oréal and Alice Chair that will bring the vision on what we are talking here about, how to create impact out of research and innovation and the role of Alice. And then later we have the participation as keynote speaker of Alan McKinnon, that indeed is quite well known academic person. Indeed, he was leading the Transport Advisory Group on Horizon 2020 a few years ago, and he will drive through the experience, what's his experience on this. Then I'll do a short teaser of the BOOSTLOG project, and later we will go in detail with Carolina Ciprés on some of the activities we plan, and particularly we have here today 3 examples of companies or organizations that manage to convert research and innovation projects results into market solutions, new markets even, and working solutions into the market. And later on we will have Andreas Nettstretter that will drive us into, okay, now we learned what we have done and what's next, what are the needs of research and innovation that we will also drive through the BOOSTLOG project. So with this short intro on the agenda for today, I wanted to hand over to François-Régis for his keynote today. Or short welcome.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Thank you to be here today with us. I am very happy and very proud to see how numerous you are. The number of attendees today is quite impressive. So just to present me in a few words, I am chairing Alice now for 2 years. Super happy and also honored to do that for the sake of, I would say, the future of logistics and innovation in Europe. And also I'm with L'Oréal now for almost 28 years, with a track record in finance and supply chain. And now I've been in charge of the international coordination of our new sustainability program, starting early 2021. So bringing, I would say, into reality everything that we aim for in terms of, if I just speak about that, the decarbonization of our logistic flows, not only in Europe, but all across the world. So that said, I would like just to emphasize about Alice and the innovation, the importance of innovation in our logistics sector. Alice is an industry-led collaborative network to advance innovation in the logistics sector. One of the ambitions since the beginning was to ensure projects, companies, and people are connected to create an innovation ecosystem around this. Alice gathers more than 100 organizations, roughly 140 organizations, from all group of stakeholders of all kind of elements of the global value chains of the logistics sector, and forms a coalition, a collaboration for facilitating innovations in our sector to increase the competitiveness, but also to address environmental and societal challenges, such as, of course, in the first row, the climate change. Alice will make R&I results visible to the industry with the support of BOOSTLOG Project and its partners. Alice and its members develop several roadmaps, such as roadmap to decarbonize the logistics sector, roadmap to implement. We also develop recommendations to policymakers on future funding programs. For that, we created the program of liaison with projects on which more than 40 projects have participated or are participating. We work with these projects to support their dissemination and outreach. Communicating the success, maximizing impacts of EU-funded R&Is, and advocating our recommendations is absolutely key. And Alice believes that communicating successful implementation cases of R&I projects, particularly those implementation cases, have contributed to making logistics more efficient and reducing emissions, will be beneficial to attract more organizations, particularly companies, to participate in EU-funded projects, to inspire partner of projects to valorize their project's results, to raise also awareness of the value of funding for innovation to policymakers, and to strengthen the prioritization exercise to place the right challenges into the EU countries and companies' R&I programs. So a large and ambitious vision, I would say, and expectation. ALICE also aims to ensure that future funding for research and innovation from EU and member states will serve needs for innovation in the logistics sector, aligned with the EU privacy policy goals, the Green Deal, the circular economy strategy, the digitization strategy, and global competitiveness. So we're very happy to gather today to launch our BOOSTLOG program with this broad expectation and large vision of logistics and supply chain, this overarching vision of that we carry with ALICE and all the members, and somehow also, I would say, a certain kind of call for action for all the companies to join and to reinforce that role. Thank you very much. And with this, Fernando, I give the mic directly to Ellen or to you, Fernando.
You can do as you wish, but maybe
I'm very happy to welcome Ellen Menkkinen for the second keynote of the morning.
Thank you, Alan. The floor is yours, and you should be able to present. Meantime, you can put your camera and your presentation on. I would say that Alan has been inspiring ALICE for long to our zero emissions roadmap, to many of our work we have done. So then I hope in this new way, it's also so inspiring as it was in the past. So now the floor is yours. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Fernando. Can you see my slide? It's on the screen?
Perfectly.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to speak at this event. It's very nice to see that post-Brexit, a Brit like me is still eligible to give a keynote address at an EU research event. Although perhaps I should mention that I got my COVID vaccine 6 weeks ago. Congratulations to Alice and the other members of the BOOSTLOG consortium on securing this research project. You've got a very prestigious group of organizations working in this consortium, and the topic itself, it seems to me, is very important and highly relevant. It's a subject that's been very close to my heart for many years, looking at how we maximize the practical value we get from EU-funded research on logistics. What I'll be doing in this short keynote really is giving some personal reflections as somebody who's been a lifelong researcher in freight and logistics, and as you mentioned, Fernando, for a couple of years I chaired the Transport Advisory Group for Horizon 2020, and much of our discussion was about how we maximize the application and commercialization of research results. But in my own career, I've been in what I call the twilight zone between academia, industry, and public policy making. You know, to many academic purists, I suppose some of my research has been too pragmatic, too industry oriented. In my previous university, I used to be. Here's some background noise. In my previous university, I used to be called a professor of lorries. Whereas to my friends and associates in the logistics industry, I think I'm sometimes considered to be too cerebral and too theoretical. That was reflected actually in, sorry, I'm having trouble moving the slides here. there was a cartoon of me in the main road freight newspaper in the UK back in 2005, where they portrayed me as some sort of mad scientist. So it gives you a sort of identity crisis, you know, where some people think you're too theoretical and others think you're too applied. But it's not an experience I alone have had. I know many other academics who do work in logistics, I think, often feel the same. So what I'd like to do is look at this challenge of maximizing the benefits, the industrial benefits, policy benefits of logistics research from an academic perspective. And I'd like initially to focus on three things that have concerned me a lot over the years. And this is the first one, this misalignment of research performance targets. Because for many academics these days, the two main KPIs against which they're judged in research terms is their research income, and secondly, their publications, and not just publications anywhere, publications in more highly rated journals. Though a lot of logistics research is done in business schools. And business school academics these days are encouraged to publish in what they call A and A+ journals. Now, unfortunately, if you look at the journal lists that many business schools use, you find that logistics, supply chain, transport journals get relatively low ratings in those lists. And I've always felt this puts logistics as an academic discipline at a disadvantage. But this actually provoked me to write a couple of journal papers on this subject some years ago, arguing that the low ranking of these journals was proving damaging to the development of these subject areas. A lot of this also relates to a long-running debate in the academic world between whether research should be emphasizing rigor or relevance. The feeling is that to achieve real academic rigor in a theoretical and a mathematical sense, you don't want to get contaminated by contact with the real world. Whereas, you know, in a very practical subject like logistics, clearly you want to make your work relevant to that industry. I've always argued that there is no choice between these two things, that research ought to be both relevant and rigorous at the same time. But nevertheless, the fact that academics working in business schools, working on logistics, are being pushed towards higher rated journals, more theoretical journals, it seems to me it has a detrimental effect on them working with the industry and doing more pragmatic research. This actually was discussed, I think, very effectively by Johann Buxenius, professor at Gothenburg University, back in 2015, where he noted there was this widening gap between what he called curiosity-driven research in universities, which was aiming to produce good journal papers, and impact-driven research. There's a widening gap between what research projects are externally funded and what counts in academic careers and university evaluations. Now, this has been recognized here in the UK, although I work in Hamburg. My home is in Edinburgh, where I am at the moment. For almost 25 years now, the government has assessed the research done by universities in the UK on a 7-yearly cycle. And in the early days, that assessment was based entirely on academic journal publications. Then in more recent years, they've begun to include an evaluation of the impact of research. That now gets a 25% weighting overall. However, as you can see, the definition they use of impact is very broad. It's the degree to which impact has enabled, enriched, influenced, informed, or changed the performance, policies, practices, products, services, understanding, awareness, and well-being of the beneficiaries. So they cast the net very widely in their definition of what is impact. And this, because through my time in the TAG and applying for EU projects, I know that in Europe we're desperately keen to maximize the application, implementation of research results. This is not simply a European preoccupation. Some few years ago, I published a paper with a professorial colleague in China, where in China they have the same problem. What we did was we surveyed industries and academics to see to what extent research and supply chain management was having some practical application. And here's one of our conclusions. The survey found that much supply chain research does not translate into actionable knowledge for practitioners. So it's not an exclusively European problem. My second concern is this one, the exponential growth in the research literature in logistics. This is from a journal paper that was published just a few months ago, which looked at the literature, this is the journal literature in sustainable supply chain management over the period 1995 to last year. And look at the number at the bottom, 2,358 papers were published in that field. And notice how that Europe had a leading role there. It's the surge is being led by Europe. 2/3 of those papers were published since 2016. So this is an explosion of knowledge. And I simply wonder, how do we digest and synthesize this huge amount of published research? And if you look at the challenge of doing that, so I was one of the lead authors of the transport chapter of the IPCC's fifth assessment report in 2014. 14 of us reviewed the literature. We reviewed 720 references. I then did my book on decarbonizing logistics, where I tried to get an overview of the state of knowledge on that subject. I reviewed 630 references. That is hard work, reviewing all of that and synthesizing. And you know, I just wonder how in the future we're going to manage to do this, because if you look at the way in which academics are dealing with this problem, they've developed a system called systematic literature reviewing, which is a standardized series of procedures and protocols that you use when reviewing the literature on a particular subject and doing a critical appraisal of that work. And one uses keywords and so forth. And most PhDs these days would have people applying this SLR approach. But there are some problems with that. I mean, I've reviewed lots of journal papers that apply this methodology. One problem is to make the process manageable, they tend to focus on the higher rated journals and often disregard the lower rated ones, which to some extent works to the disadvantage of logistics and transport, because these journals, as I said earlier, are lower rated. The second problem is with what I call research myopia, because sometimes they fix an arbitrary cutoff date in the past, and they say we'll only review literature over the past 10 years or 15 years, and we'll disregard anything before that. And that, of course, runs the risk that we end up duplicating research that was done, 20 years ago or whatever. And this is, I think, illustrated in a paper that just came out quite recently, which reviews the literature, the academic journal literature on road freight decarbonization. And again, you can see how there's been an exponential growth in that over the past 13 or 14 years. But again, notice the cutoff period, it only goes back to 2006. Now, I've been in this game long enough to know that there were lots of relevant papers published in this field long before 2006. My third concern is what I call siloed knowledge. So again, staying on the subject of road freight decarbonization, there was a very interesting report published by Shell and Deloitte just about a month ago. Unlike many other reports of this type, it was well referenced. There are 65 references in that report, but only one of them to an academic journal paper. And then the paper I just mentioned a moment ago, the one by Tobias Mayer, which incidentally is a really good paper, and I would strongly encourage you to read it, right? So I'm not criticizing either of these reports, but I'm just looking at the reference structure, because Tobias's paper makes 92 references to academic journal papers. There's no reference at all to industry or consultancy reports. So we've got sort of two self-contained literatures here that are not being properly cross-referenced. So the one on the left is an example of a grey literature, as we call it, which is not peer-reviewed, and obviously the academic literature is peer-reviewed. Because we're not cross-referencing, there's a risk that we're not making the right connections, and we're missing synergies between the research being done by these two communities. And the other thing is, who then is taking it upon themselves to review and synthesize research in these two domains? The worry is that we have two parallel systems of research here which are not properly interacting. And the other question is, this is the killer question, how much research literature is actually read outside academic circles? that there was an article in Forbes magazine about 5 or 6 years ago where this guy said, should managers read academic articles? And he answers his question by saying, absolutely, it gives them access to important new ideas about earlier, it gives them access to important new ideas much earlier than popular books, but will they do it? Probably not. Leaders usually don't have the time to battle with the inaccessible prose of academic articles. Ouch, that really hurts. Anyway, I followed a rather devious route to get to the main subject, which is, how we increase the impact of research on logistics funded by the EU and others. And just to introduce that subject, I came across these statistics recently from McKinsey. They were presented at my university's Innovators Day back in January. So what McKinsey has done is looked at the level of funding of logistics startups in different parts of the world and related that to logistics revenue in those regions. And all of a sudden we see there's a major mismatch here. The amount of startup funding for logistics businesses in Europe is very low by comparison with the level of revenue. I think that's a rather worrying set of data. Now, you could perhaps try to explain why the level of startup funding is relatively low in Europe by saying that Europe has a very mature logistics market. You could also say that much of the R&D funding is done within established businesses within Europe. But then again, look at the figures for America. I mean, that's an equally mature logistics market. So it seems to me there may be a for EU R&I funding to stimulate startup activity in logistics. But of course, that's not the sole function. We should recognize that research has to fulfill a number of needs, to support general business improvement. Obviously, there's an environmental agenda. It's also designed to inform public policy making. So one key point I would like to make here is that if we're wanting to maximize the impact and dissemination of research, that has to be embedded in the whole research process, going right back to the choice of topics that deserve research funding, through the framing of the research calls, through attracting the right research teams to do the work, through evaluating their proposals, through the actual research process, maintaining a close link between the researchers, and those could be academics and consultants, with the practitioners, and then through the dissemination and the incentivization that is put in place really to maximize adoption, implementation, and commercialization, and also informing future research agendas, because I see this research process as being circular. There will always be unanswered questions at the end of the process, which then feed back into the next round of research funding. Now, if I just look at the first of these stages in the research process, I mean, how we choose impactful topics for research funding reminds me of my days on the tag back in 2014, for example. We had a great group of people on the tag. We had very lively discussions trying to establish what were the main research challenges in the field of transport. We actually came up with 11 of them, and then we looked at how they were all interrelated, and out of that flowed a whole series of research calls from the EU. And it did occur to me that let's suppose the tag was still in existence today. One of the pet projects that I would be pushing for in the area of sustainable logistics, and I'll just flag up a few. One is, I think we need more research looking at what the optimal modal split will be for freight traffic in Europe, using projected data for future carbon intensity trends by different transport modes. And at the moment, we rely on historical data or current data. I don't think we look enough at how the relative carbon intensity of modes will change. Another thing, we need more research on the combined impact of climate change mitigation, adaptation, negative emissions, pulling the greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere. How will all of these things together impact on the future development of logistics in Europe? Another thing is, what's the potential contribution of the blockchain to product carbon auditing across supply chains that maybe one day will allow us to put carbon labels on products? And then finally, if we see Europe as a source of a lot of used vehicles that are then, after their life in Europe, they go and spend another life in other parts of the world emitting. How is that global supply chain in used vehicles going to change as we transition from internal combustion engine vehicles towards lower carbon powertrains? So I have no influence at all on any of this, but these are topics, it seems to me, that would merit more research. And then just coming to the end, if you think of the issues that have to be addressed in the other stages of the research process, on framing research calls, there are obviously issues which are always debated here about the scoping of the call, about its internal coherence, about the amount of latitude or freedom that you give the applicants to define the topic. I also wonder to what extent the consolidation of research into bigger projects, I suppose partly done to minimize transaction costs, but what has been the net effect of that on the application of research results and the impact that it's had on industry? On attracting the right research teams, it seems to me what we need is mixed teams, bringing together academics, practitioners, consultants, or various organizations into the consortium so that that is embedded, if you like, into the research process. Now, of course, this makes it difficult, bringing together these different stakeholder groups. I also think, from long experience of doing this, that the personal chemistry of individuals is often a key determinant of the success of a project. On the evaluation of the proposals, clearly we have to maximize the weighting that we attach to dissemination and potential impact in assessing proposals. But also, we're going to be careful how we judge the promises that are made by applicants in their proposals. Are they being honest when they say there's going to be a huge commercial benefit or environmental benefit emerging from the work? How do we test those claims? And then during the research process, as I said, we've got a spectrum here. I mean, you can involve industry directly in the project, or they can have a more peripheral role through being represented, for example, on an advisory board. But wherever you are on that spectrum, I think this is something that should be encouraged. And then, of course, there's the whole issue about the research dynamics of a project, how they change when you bring together the researchers and the managers and the policymakers within that forum. Now, we've had a lot of experience over the years with action research and living labs, where you bring together the practitioners with the academics and the consultants in the project. On the whole, I think that experience has been good. It's given us good feedback, and I think that's something that needs to be encouraged. And then finally, on the dissemination, again, a whole host of issues. Some I mentioned earlier about when you're disseminating, what proportion of the output should go into peer-reviewed journals, how much of it should be put in as grey literature into other reports. I think one should always try to adopt a multi-channel strategy to try to target as many audiences as possible. We shouldn't just think of this in terms of text. We should think of the tools that also emerge from the research. And then finally, archiving gets back to the point I mentioned earlier about research myopia. I mean, sometimes I go back and I try to find deliverables from EU-funded projects from 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I struggle to find them. I think we have to be much better at archiving the results of our research, which leads me to my final point. Because on the subject of archiving, one thing I came across recently was a quotation from the English philosopher Bertrand Russell, which I think might serve as a philosophical definition of logistics. It was in an essay he wrote in 1932 called In Praise of Idleness, which is a rather dubious title for all us workaholics. But what he said was this. He said, work is of two kinds. First, altering the position of matter at or near the Earth's surface relative to other such matter. And second, telling people to do so. The first kind is unpleasant and unpaid, ill-paid. The second is pleasant and highly paid. And I thought I would take the liberty of extending that quotation and say there's a third kind of work, researching how matter should be moved in a way that improves competitiveness and minimizes carbon emissions. this is satisfying and essential. And I offer that as a mission statement, I think, for the BOOSTLOG project. Those are my contact details. One thing I'd just like to do to finish is to flag up a journal paper, which I assure you is not written in inaccessible prose, which it's going to be published in a few weeks' time, where I take a 40-year perspective on how logistics management has impacted on freight transport research. Now, I know the academics in the audience can access that through their journal databases, but if you're not able to access journals, you drop me an email and I'll send you a pre-publication copy of that. I hope you found that of interest. I hope I've provoked some thinking, and enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alan, for the nice keynote. Indeed, as I could imagine before inviting you, you were already providing with this keynote a framework for us to work in BOOSTLOG. I will hear once and again this keynote in the process of the project, because I think you touch upon very interesting topics. I'm afraid we are a little bit back on a schedule. There were an intensive chat on open access versus non-open access, and a few things in the chat. So maybe, Alan, if you don't mind, you could go through them over the chat, if that's not okay, and then we can move on the agenda. And now it's indeed my turn to do a short presentation on BOOSTLOG. So then you already frame it quite well, what we are talking here in BOOSTLOG, what we are going to talk about in BOOSTLOG. And here what I'm going to say is that, first of all, in BOOSTLOG, we will address the importance of innovation for the logistics sector. At the end, BOOSTLOG is not a project, it's the project that will provide a freight transport and logistics ecosystem with the means to maximize impact out of research investments. The logistics sector is in continuous change, requiring agility and flexibility. Logistics needs to adapt and have the means and tools to do so. Great challenges are ahead of us, particularly related to the climate change and how to achieve related objectives in an economic viable way, what is very important in order to do so. And this calls for a truly integrated transport system and for new paradigms such as the physical internet. In this context, and as highlighted previously by the speakers, Alan and François Régis, we need to ensure the results of the projects from decades of EU investments in research and innovation are available and of use for the industry and policymakers. So, indeed, research and innovations needs to deliver on the industry roadmaps and the EU priorities. And here we have both of them at the level of ALICE in industry and European Commission for the policy. Freight transport and logistics is at the core of both industry and policies. More and more industries are setting bold objectives in terms of decarbonizations and social responsibility. While in the past, the companies were targeting direct impacts, now they are looking at the full supply chain, including Scope 3 emissions. This means that it go beyond the boundaries, going into their suppliers and even to their consumer behavior. And here Sergio has one good example with the pods for washing machines. On those areas, research and innovation has delivered amazing results, calling for the implementation, particularly to achieve a truly integrated transport system supporting the decarbonization. Europe is facing a challenging period within the COVID-19 pandemics. We are convinced we will overcome this period successfully, but not without damage and pain. But even greater challenges will wait ahead behind the next corner. The EU has anticipated both challenges and opportunities in great synchrony with the industry and society request. So more concretely, what is BOOSTLOG about? Through the BOOSTLOG, we will look into the past and learn for the future. On the basis of our extensive knowledge in ALICE on past projects funded by the EU, We will identify key research and innovation results and outcomes to make them visible to industry and policymakers. Additionally, we will dig in what we call the implementation cases. Today, we have 3 very good examples of what we mean with implementation cases, so I will not explain here. And we already identified more than 10 examples. And even yesterday in the blockchain webinar, it was very nice with when TradeLanes, the venture between IBM and Musk, started saying everything started with the research-funded projects Cassandra and Co. This is indeed what we think, that many of the, or much of the research that has been done has really contributed to real things that are in the market. And we need to find them to make it clear for all the policymakers how well they did in these investments. We expect to reach the identification of at least 30 implementation cases operating in the market or implemented in policies. Based on our consortium assessment, but in close collaboration with our network and those organizations with higher participation in funded research, we will create industry reports that are accessible and actionable for the industry and policymakers, and we will recognize these implementation cases there. Also, which could be further implementation opportunities of these results. Carolina Ciprés from ZLC will provide later on more details on how we plan to do this. We will also gather that what worked well on those projects and what didn't work at all, which are the specific elements or ingredients that can make a project or program increase the likelihood of success. Throughout outreach towards the European Commission, industry and member states in the ALICE Mirror Group, we will lever the findings and gather other learnings so we can generate a virtuous innovation ecosystem. As a concrete output, we will create an innovation marketplace linked to the ALICE knowledge platform that gathers the results of the various projects relevant for our roadmap's implementation. This will be the arena for innovation seekers and innovation owners as well as investors, so they can meet and scale up outcomes and convert them in innovative market solutions. We will also look into the future and identify high priority and potential research and innovation gaps that are of critical importance to achieve our objectives. Andreas Nestrotter from Fraunhofer and AML will provide more details on how and when we will do this. Basically, we will create recommendations for the Horizon Europe calls, but also to countries and companies, as we have done in the past in ALICE quite successfully in terms of the reach we got in the calls. The resulting new projects will be seduced to be liaised with ALICE, and François Regis said we had already 40 projects and we plan to keep this activity within ALICE, so we can create this process also in the next generation of projects. Last but not least, we will take over the methodologies and the assets that are generated through BOOSTLOG. We will have the right tools to enlarge the ecosystem at scale, getting more and more companies, governments, and research and development working together. As we say in ALICE, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And here, with the challenges we have, we need to go together. And we really have now, with BOOSTLOG, the tool, the framework to create that. And it's more up to you as an individual company or organization if you want to work alone or together. If you want to go to work together, BOOSTLOG and ALICE will be always open for you. And this is my last thing. And we do this together with, of course, with the excellent and well-balanced partnership that we created to answer to this call. And this is why we are very confident we will achieve and successfully our objectives. We have here not only great organizations, but also great people behind them that will make this happen. Thank you very much. And now I think it's more the turn for you, Jianjin, to take over, and then we will get the presentation from Carolina Ciprés. Carolina?
Hello. Hello, everybody. I think Jan-Jim, is going to share my presentation. So I'm going to take over from where Fernando left in what we intend to do from BOOSTLOG side. And in this section of the event, we want to share with you how we are going to look for research results implementation cases, both in the market and in the policy fields. Okay. Next slide. So indeed, building a bit upon what Fernando already mentioned, what is the challenge that we in BOOSTLOG are facing, well, in BOOSTLOG and in general, in research for logistics, is that we have research results from European funded projects, but they are difficult to find and valorize. And you may argue, okay, they are easy to find. They are in the CORDIS database that the Commission has is publishing with all the new projects. And for the newer projects, you even have there the deliverables of those projects. Yes, but this is the issue, that deliverables are reports on the work that the projects have developed, are not actionable results that can be taken over and moved to the market and implemented by industry. So this is where the challenge lies, on the difficulty to find and valorize those results, products and results, right? But also it's not only a problem of finding these results, it's also the barriers that the results are finding, because there is regulation that they have to face, there is market fragmentation, but it's also resistance to change, to take over innovative solutions coming from new projects. And this is more to do with the companies' unwillingness to adapt sometimes to these new challenges and new results. So this is a combination of the challenges that we are facing, but also we are facing a challenge having to do with attributing the impact of the results of the projects. And when we talk about attribution, we will explain now how we intend to find different attributes to the projects and their results, and how this is something that BOOSTLOG will deal with. Okay, next slide. Fernando already mentioned that the approach for BOOSTLOG is going to be first to look into the past, because many projects have been funded already. We in BOOSTLOG have identified more than 160 projects already relevant for logistics. So we want to look into those projects because there is a lot of European funds that are being invested there, and there are results valorizable there. But we are not only going to look into the past in the projects, we are also going to launch a call to experts. And events like this one today is reaching out to you, as the experts are the ones involved in previous projects, to also get from you these actionable results. And we will see later on today how we are calling to you for help in this regard. But we are also going to look into the future, and this is something that Andreas will explain later today, how we are going to combine this approach on looking into the past and looking into the future and delivering recommendations for future research. Next slide, please. Specifically, when we are going to look into the past, what are the expected outcomes we intend to have? First of all, to map the most relevant projects. I mentioned that we already had identified more than 160 projects. You may also argue this is something that we are going to be facing the same challenge of valorizing these results, having something more actionable. But we are having a competitive advantage here in BOOSTLOG. First of all, partners of the consortium have been already involved in many of these projects. So we have direct connection to the people involved in these projects. But not only this, but also members of Alice organization, members of Alice Association have been involved in many of these projects. So through Alice, we may reach out to them. So we are not only looking at what is already published in the databases. No, we have direct connection to the people involved there. And for those that are outside Alice, we are going to launch this course. So our added value here is really to reach out to people involved in these projects and learn from them, from their experience, right? And we have defined what we mean by different stages in this expected outcome. So we are going to map the projects. We are going to identify the results, and the results are the deliverables of those projects. But then we are going to look at the outcomes. And with outcomes, we mean these results that can be taken into the market, into the policy field, results that are actionable by industry or by policymakers, right? This is what we are really looking at. And then we are going to look beyond that. We are going to look into the implementation cases. We will see later what do we mean with these implementation cases. Fernando was mentioning this. We have defined different logistics clouds. We have defined 6. And then we will have a report, a cluster around each one of them with implementation cases that are impacting on those. And we will have, we have 6 already defined, and we will have 2 more that will be defined throughout the life of the project. But we will also, with this clustering of logistics clouds, we will also be learning on the impact that research funding has had in each one of the clouds, but also on the barriers that this group of implementation cases has found. So this is some learning that we can then derive into recommendations for the future. If we move into the next slide, I was thinking, how do we explain what we mean with implementation cases? And we thought the best way to explain is with example, right? So let's bring implementation cases that have been successful. Let's explain through them, what do we mean? And we have here examples of projects that led to an implementation case. We have Icargo Project that led to Mixmove Maths platform. And this platform eventually became a company itself, a legal entity that is Mixmove. Also, we have another example, COFRET project for emission measurement and reporting that led to Big Mile company being created. But also COFRET developed the GLEC framework that later on was validated through LEARN project. And these 2 projects led to the GLEC implementation case, because this is now being used by companies. Companies are measuring their logistics emission using the GLEC framework. So this is now into the market. We will be seeing later today the details of those, but I think it was better to show you examples of implementation cases and now explain you what we are looking for in those implementation cases. So if we move to the next slide, I can share with you here what do we mean, the definition we in BOOSTLOG give to these implementation cases. So first of all, a key feature of these implementation cases is that we can identify a causal link between the funding and the implementation of the result, that it was either a technology, an organizational change, or a new process innovation. So there must be a causal link between the 2. But also these outcomes will have to be either a market implementation or an implementation in the policy field. So those 2 are the main features of the implementation cases. Causal link between the funding and the implementation, and it has to be in the market or in the policy field. We are going to gather these implementation cases, and we will identify these links, these causal links. And this is where your contribution is really valuable, because we are calling up to you. Please talk to us, come to us if you have an implementation case, because we want to learn from your implementation case, how you moved from a project result to going to the market and to going into the policy field. Learning from you can also help derive recommendations for future research in Europe. So it's key to learn from the ones that really implemented this. So please reach out. When you do reach out, we are going to be asking you different questions about these implementation cases. And I wanted to show you what kind of questions we are going to be asking to them. So first of all, we are going to ask the project results and outcomes that led to the implementation case. We say this in plural because in many cases, different projects led to an implementation case. And we just saw this today because COFRET and LEARN project led to the GLEC framework. So it can be that different projects are required for one implementation case. We will also be asking the main pain point. We will be asking the main pain point that is addressed by the implementation case, the market it is addressing as well, but also the EU priorities. Fernando was showing 4 EU priorities that the Commission launched last year. But we may find, and it is something that we are seeing already, that past projects, past results are already impacting on EU priorities that have been created later on. So learning that part of those priorities are being already covered, but something that has been already done, is really interesting because we don't have to start from scratch, but we have to be aware of that, right? And also we are going to be asking about how funding impacted the implementation case, and specifically when was it key to have this funding, right? And also the gray area we find from the research results to the implementation cases. There is a moment when the project finishes, the results are there. And there is a time lag between that then and when the implementation case is in the market. What is happening in between? How is this gap covered? Because in many situations, it is not even the developers of the results, the ones that take that into the market. So we want to learn about this process that goes on in between. If we move to the next slide, we also want to learn from the concerns and the barriers that the implementation cases found. And we have identified potential ones to do with further financing or finding the right partners, of creating a value proposition that was valued by customers, creating a business model that was sustainable, but others also as well. We want to learn from those implementation cases, what were the hurdles they found, but also the success factors, because if we really identify the success factors for these implementation cases, we can derive recommendations for the future. How should research funding be in the future? How should results be taken into the market or into the policy field to make sure they are successful? So this is really giving us the path for doing it right, okay? And just wanted to go to the next slide to give the floor, next slide please, to give the floor to the implementation cases themselves, because as mentioned, I don't want to extend myself. I want you to hear from the implementers, from the ones who took over these results to the market or to the policy field, and learn from them how they built a successful implementation case. So that's all from my side. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much, Carolina, for the presentation. And now I hand over to Jan Torre, that it's also a person with a very broad and long experience in European research. And I think he also has a lot to share in this context and about what we are talking about. So Jan Torre, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Can you share this presentation, please? Somebody?
Janjin?
Or do I have to do it?
No, Janjin is doing it.
Okay, so Icargo is one among the 30+ European projects I've been participating in. But prior to that, I've been working in the borderline between research and commercializing results since the beginning of the 70s, actually late 60s. And next slide. And what I've really come to conclude here is that there are three, should I say, common denominators in all of those projects that is successful, in my view, successful from the point of view of commercializing results. Obviously, many projects create knowledge, but what I'm concentrating on here is really those who have resulted in anything that is commercialized and remain live product afterwards. The top one and the most important one is a demanding customer, because a demanding customer has a tangible pain, tangible need to be dealt with, and then can create the constraint, the requirements, etc., for the things that is to be researched. Then you need obviously capable R&D expertise to go with this, so that you are using state-of-the-art knowledge to solve the issues. But if you want to make it commercially attractive, you need somebody who is concerned with the results after the project is finished, and that is the provider that is willing to commercialize the results and run with them afterwards. I've been lucky enough to work in at least 2 such projects. One was my first when I was working in a big a company in Norway called Kværner, and we developed the transportation solution between the Nordic countries and Zeebrugge for the company Stora Enso, where Stora Enso was the demanding customers, where we had R&D institutes there, but Kværner Ships Equipment was then the provider willing to commercialize the results. Next slide, please. What is concerned here is the Icargo project, and it was going on from 2011 to 15, and it was about using intelligent cargo or information system to create sustainable logistics. And what we were then thinking was that, how can we do this? And the best thing we could think of was to improve load factors. Everybody was talking about half-filled trucks, etc. And load factors was the one thing that we really thought we could do something about. Next slide. And then in the project, we had Malo, which was me at the time. We had DHL, and we had R&D organizations like this. And even then, next slide, or next. Then at the same time, 3M came to us and said, we have a problem. We have, and then you can go to the next. We have a problem where we currently are sending customer orders from factory or warehouse to customers directly. And then we are essentially transporting air because we can only have one layer of pallets. What we want to do is to delay customer orders, creating of customers' orders as close as possible to the customer, the terminal closest to the customer. And with that, they were able to think parcels, not pallets, until the last mile. And that led them to have a load factor going from about 45 to 90%. And they needed information systems to manage the logistics process that handled that. Next slide, please. So we were lucky enough then with DHL, with 3M, to start developing this logistics process. And we did something which was, at least in many ways, unheard of at the time, because we started to do the product implementation even throughout the project, to the point that we had to keep silent about it, because we were, or some people were afraid that the Commission and other outside would think that this was too close to commercial things, even though we were quite experimental, and I'll tell you why. So what we were doing then is that we were developing this capability to mix, move, and match cargo. We had the first implementation even a year after the project was initiated. It was in Icargo, DHL operation in Icargo near Brussels, and we had full live operation even before 2014, before the project was finished. On that way, you will see that IPIC 2017, we had an award because the mechanisms that we had created was essentially something that could turn any terminal into a logistics node, very close to a physical internet node. And we as Malo were then commercializing it. We were looking for how to really expand it. And then we realized that being a man and a dog, with this office that you see the picture of as the main office of the company, was not a way to have this company grow. So we were then looking to really finding how can we have external investors going into this. And then we realized that in order to do that, the company that we had already, which was never ever organized for being a growing commercial enterprise, needed to be changed. And we then decided that we need to form a new company, clean, no history in finance or anything, transfer all IPR related to this product, to this new company, and then attract investment. And one of the aspects that I also want to say is that when we started this, my colleagues Nuno Bento and Arthur Alves and I, we were essentially technicians with a little bit of commercial, shall we say, experience, but we really did not have the commercial gene. So we needed, in order to make this fly, we got in contact with Knut Fredrik Ramstad, who is now the CEO of MixMove. And from here, I hand over to you, Knut Fredrik.
Thank you, Jan Tore. Next slide, please. The good thing about Jan Tore and Nuno Bento and Jaco and the thought leaders in this industry is that they have a capability of telling a really good story, and they are also proven that it's working. So when I met these gentlemen, they talked about the physical internet, and that caught my interest. And to us, like for MixMove now, it's like that's the North Star for us. Is that we believe that parcels will run through terminals or nodes, like Jan Tore is saying, like emails are doing on servers. So with a full control over where the parcel is, who is carrying it, it's not that important. The most important thing is that I get the service that I'm paying for and I know where it is. So that caught my interest, and I met these gentlemen, and that was back in 2017, 2018. We agreed, like Jan Tore was saying, to make a clean cut on this. We presented the idea, we presented the result of the pilot that came out to investors, and they really jumped on, giving us a little bit at a time, meaning again that we need to show results and then grow the business from A to B to C to D. And that has been the journey that I've been luckily to be a part of together with Jan Tore. We are also awarded by Gartner as a cool vendor in the supply chain. So everything that's happening in the supply chain within logistics, it's spot on for what we have been doing. But the industry, if you take the next slide, please. Thank you. The industry is lacking behind, and it's also not meeting all the challenges that EU and all the large companies actually in this entity is actually focusing on, is actually how to be more sustainable, how to reduce CO2. And we talked about fill rates and the fill rates that we are working on together with our customers is that we know that 72% of all the goods in Europe is running on are moved on the road, and from there 22% in Europe. Maybe that's changed a little bit now if Alan come up with new figures, but the trucks are running around empty, and the rest of them is half full. The same goes for containers, and that's a huge challenge when we talk about emission and how to do this efficiently. And this is what actually was the main thing for Jan Tore and 3M and DHL back in the days, is that actually, how could we utilize the resources that we have available to be more efficient, to be more transparent, and to be more and collaborative in the way we are going forward. So we see that due to COVID, we see that transport is increasing. Due to COVID, we see that there's the need for resilience. But we also see that this industry is lacking resilience and they're lacking flexibility due to that they are not digitizing their operational supply chain. They are sitting on old systems which are not collaborating at all. And then it's hard for a company like MixMove, which is unknown, to actually go out there and preach the new thing which is going on. So we need to focus on the CO2 emissions, and we also need to focus on how to actually turn air into money. And that's the whole thing about the story that we are telling. So if you can go to the next, please. So like Jan Tore is saying, what we are doing is actually we support a chaotic loading. and we move the goods in a chaotic manner towards the customer, and where we match it. So that's where we have the mix and move and match, and then it's go out for deliverance. That's the whole concept that what we are doing, and we see that that's the smart way of doing things. Prior to this, we also see that Amazon is sponsoring what's called a chaotic warehousing, meaning again it's not a structured way of putting up the goods in the warehouse. They are mixing it all over to make sure that they are utilizing the space and efficiency, and they get the same results that we have gotten with our solution. Is that we increase the throughput time, we reduce the warehouse space, and we also reduce emission. Next, please. So what Jan Tore and 3M and DHL with Jakob managed to do is actually reduce the cost, reduce the carbon footprint, and they improved the fill rates on the long haul. By doing that, they reduced the need of trucks. And for the 3PL or for the service provider in this industry, for them, they could actually sell the spare trucks to other customers, which is actually a win-win-win if we get there. But then we need to collaborate. Next, please. So we are in the position, we have a network, we have a framework of hubs using it. What you see here is actually that 3M owns the process, so shippers owning the process, but they're outsourcing the service. And that's the message that we are bringing through. And it's not on behalf of any one of the other ones, because it's business for everyone here. It's but again, a small company like Mixmove, which we are at the moment, have a hard time going out there telling that story. So we need to really focus on the segmentation of our story. We need to focus on, next please. We need to have a very focused sales focus. We need to have product focus on what we are going to deliver. We need to take it down. Talking about the physical internet to our customers scares them off because they don't get their heads around it. We need to talk about what sort of market do we think is mature for our product. And we need to be efficient in the sales so we can grow and be there. We see that e-commerce is booming. We see that parcel shipping is booming. So full truckloads and full container loads will not be the demand going forward. It's all about less than full truckloads. And then you need a solution to handle that. And that's where we are focusing now, actually telling them that if you would like to be part of the business which are passing through to the e-commerce channel, and business to business e-commerce is much larger than business to consumer, that's where you need to add features on top of your existing systems. And then our cloud solution is coming in. Next, please. So we are on this path. Chasing our North Star, which for us is that to be one of the enabler of the physical internet. When that will happen, we do not know. We have some plans together with you guys, but what we have been doing, we have make sure that we are building the connectivity. We have a single source of truth. We have decision support. What we will work on now is interoperability and also add in artificial intelligence. And we have also now added the digital twin together with the GS1. So we are on this road to really be one of the enabler of the physical internet. But and I would like to say that I thought this would go much faster than it has. And that's due to of course, COVID put us a little bit behind, but that doesn't matter actually. The whole thing is that it takes a little bit longer than you always expect. But we are moving. We have managed to increase our revenues year by year, doubled them actually. So it's a very good story, and it's very fun to work with some thought leaders that we have in our organization and in the environment of Alice. So that was actually my last slide. So thank you. And
you see, this is a very different story from what we could have had if Icargo would have been a traditional project where everybody then leaves report, archives the results for further research in project like BOOSTLOG. I mean, we have a lot of challenges going forward, and some of them are based on what Alan indicated, where the lack of venture money in Europe versus other continents. But we have moved 150 million parcels since Icargo started, and I think that's a pretty good feat. Thanks.
Thank you, Jan Tore. Thank you, Knut, for your intervention. And I think very good insights on how you transferred and examples. As I always said, the EU machine on projects is so good in doing the projects that it's not so much time that to understand what is behind those projects. And there is where I think the projects like BOOSTLOG can really help to clarify and get these examples you bring forward. And make them more visible. And now we move to the second implementation case. I'm very happy to introduce Esther Beron from a Smart Freight Center that will drive us into their implementation case on a Smart Freight Center from different and various projects. So please, Esther, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Fernando. Thank you. Yeah, Carolina has been already doing some introductions for us about the projects I represent, but I will bring you indeed a little bit of time travel of about 10 years going back from 2011, showing different EU-funded projects which have or still having support for the freight greenhouse gas emissions calculations, and with that with the GLAC framework. So before we start with the EU-funded projects, I have one slide just to quickly introduce you Smart Freight Center, an organization I represent. We are a dedicated NGO to global zero emissions freight and logistics. And with that, we are guiding companies, we are providing advocacy and raising awareness on zero emissions freight. We have a goal where we would like to have at least 100 multinationals. So not just a couple, but 100 multinationals at least, moving towards 30% reduction of greenhouse gases, where the base was 2015, and by 2050 to make that zero emissions. So to do this, to reach this goal, we are developing throughout different projects relevant guidelines. And those guidelines are always building on existing research and support implementation by global advocacy. So that's where the BOOSTLOG project is also relevant, where we are partner of. So starting with the first project, indeed, was the corporate project, which actually helped to establish a Smart Freight Center in one sense. And this was a research project where the primary focus was on greenhouse gas calculation tool development. But actually, what the advisory board came after is that there were already tools there. So instead of developing a new tool, they swifted a little bit the approach. And the primary outcomes of the project were basically a scientific review of existing calculation methodologies, strong industry network with vision for the future, so concrete exploitation plan was developed, and ISO international agreement sowing the seeds for the future development. So SFC initiated the GLAC, the Global Logistic Emission Council, with the corporate advisory board. And that means that we have also industry engagement at the global level, thanks to the corporate project, and with a clear goal and work program for support funding. And as always, the projects are important, but really the people are which are important behind them. So I have showcased a couple of people who were involved in the corporate project, but still involved in the GLAC as well. But we can go, I know I don't have that much time, so we can go on the next slide. So what is the GLAC as such? So the Global Logistic Emission Council, as a voluntary partnership, was established in 2014, involving a lot of multinationals, experts, and relevant calculation tool providers as well, which were already part of the COFRED project or have joined towards 2014 at the beginning. And working with these companies and organizations, we have been doing a lot of consultations to develop the GLAC framework for logistic emission calculations. a sort of framework for existing methodologies, which brought the existing standards to the same level to ensure basically apple-to-apple comparison of global multimodal supply chains. Now we got the confidence from the fact that the framework has gained the built-on greenhouse gas protocol mark already when it was launched in 2016, and actually it was a Brexit announcement day. But also the launch of the GLAC framework in 2016. So what we did from that point on, there was a new EU-funded project announced where we have decided to take the lead in Global. So on the next slide you can see about the LEARN project, which indeed started in 2016, and the goal of the project was to mobilize businesses to reduce their carbon footprint across their global logistics supply chains through improved emissions calculations and reporting. So we wanted to make sure that companies are understanding the importance of the following chain of, first of all, to calculate, to report, and to take decisions. And not to start with actions, but really take the numbers in before they start to optimize their supply chains, for example. But the eventual goal is to optimize and minimize emissions. So with that, we had a great consortium of a lot of partners, which you can see, and I will not go into list as we don't have time, but these partners have evolved a network of further many organizations. So that sense this was a networking project, while the COFRED project was more a research project. The main outcomes of the project you can see on the next slide. We had four big policy or four big asks towards different stakeholder groups. So for example, businesses to really calculate the logistic emissions using the GLAC framework, report more consistent and reliable logistic emission data, the government and research institute to support the business to do so, and all stakeholders to join a growing network to help business to be leaders. So back in 2016 and after that 2019, it was still the leading companies who were just considering freight calculations. Now the good thing is that a lot of output of the LEARN project are still live. So I'm listing here 8 points. So the first two is to guide greenhouse gas accounting at logistics sites as part of the GLAC framework. So there is that guide is still existing, and as I'm aware, it's also get a recent update and further project support. We also have a calculation tools info sheet still active. And if we go to the next points, the GLAC framework challenge cases and company examples. So we are still disclosing a lot of examples of how companies are calculating and reporting and setting targets in that sense. So we still want to, and we find it useful that the companies get inspiration for these cases. So we still have a lot of cases on our website, and we update it at least every month with one. The next point was here. I mean, we can go indeed a bit faster here. Training courses on emissions accounting. So just last year we have also launched a sustainable logistic roadmap training, which goes even a step further to support companies to understand how to actually at all start their journey on sustainable freight and actions towards that. And we have still declaration form for GLAC Active. We still have a strong research agenda, meaning with the update of the GLAC framework, for example, policy recommendations and input on ISO standards. So we are part of the ISO project, which updates or which creates a new ISO standards called 14083, which is general for transportation, but the freight-related elements are strongly supported to be based on the GLAC framework. And with the LEARN, we also established this network and also an annual workshop to continue potentially with the BOOSTLOG project now. So being part of that, we see, for example, the BOOSTLOG project building on that network further to spread awareness. If we go to the next slide, I can show you a little bit of what happened when this LEARN project finished. So in 2019, we launched the GLAC Framework 2.0. So that was a little bit also the result of the LEARN project, which had input from a lot of testing, of course, to engage to make the GLAC framework even more practical based on that those implementation projects of the LEARN project. And then we updated the GLAC strategy as well, meaning that we expanded our focus from only the calculations to other emission reductions related projects. And currently we're working also a lot with Alice. Once the roadmap, if we one more click here, I have some animations. So the zero emissions roadmap, and currently we're also working together with Alice on emissions, low emissions fuels and vehicles project. And in 2019 we had this big ship as members, but soon I will show you a different picture which shows even further that now on the next slide, I believe you can see that the partnership for this year has expanded into a gigantic ship, and we have engaged a lot of partners. And I have a couple of more elements for this slide, if you can click yes. So we are not just recognized by the Greenhouse Gas Protocol mark, but also have strong recommendations for CDP and also Science-Based Targets Initiative. We are working on freight, updating the existing transportation guidelines of SBTi by mode. This is an ongoing project. And the Climate Cleaner Coalition as well is endorsing the GLAC framework. And as I mentioned, it is also the base for the ISO standards. We are aware that at least 100 companies, actually more than 100 companies, are using currently GLAC framework, meaning that they actually told us so. But many of them are, of course, doing that without informing us. We are also accrediting programs and tools to actually help the global implementation of the GLAC framework. There are a couple of links you can look at yourself to learn more about the GLAC framework of GLAC. To close, what I wanted to talk about today is that besides establishing the GLAC and establishing the GLAC framework, these EU-funded projects have also created a new market for freight emissions calculations. And here there can list a couple of things, given that indeed there is a confidence now on the calculation methodologies. There are more and more calculation tools as well in alignment with these methodologies. And to help that, we have also established an SFC validation, ensuring the alignment with the GLAC framework on company level, so companies can really get that sort of validation with that service. And calculation tool providers are accredited by SFC, so we can refer to these listed calculation tool providers for companies who want to seek external support to ensure that they freight greenhouse gas calculations are aligned with this global standard. And then following the ISO 14083 development finish, which we expect next year, we can surely see further market inspection to happen. And basically we are the state where companies can really feel the pressure to calculate. It's not anymore a leadership action, it's a mess. It has to be more mainstreamed action for companies, and in that sense they have a really wide choice of tools they can use and ways to go about it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Esther, for the insightful presentation on how you were moving the story from COFRED to the GLAC framework and the impact that you are reaching. And indeed, this is where a few projects or a project event can indeed create a completely new market here on the carbon emissions and measurement. But I want to say also that this came after the publication of the transport white paper, in which this was one of the lines of action in the transport white paper in 2011 that was taken by the program as project, and you see how much you can get out of this traction. And there we have this framework that is the GLAC and how companies are working. And now we go even to a new area in which the results were used and valorized. And here we have today the presentation for a specific company, Big Mile, and happy to have Nico, that indeed Nico was one of the founders of Alice even before it was called Alice. So I'm very happy Nico is with us today here. So the floor is yours, Nico, Jack. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fernando, and hello, everyone. Previously, it was already mentioned it are challenging times with the impact of COVID on global supply chains. not even to mention what is happening with the Ever Given struck in the Suez Canal. I had a talk yesterday with the Rotterdam Port Authority, and they already expect great disruption next week within energy, containers, and cars. So let's hope that it will be solved very soon, and we don't have to rename the Ever Given into the Forever Stuck. Next slide, please. You see in this slide the whole ecosystem of what is happening in carbon footprinting. A lot of excellent initiatives. I'm very happy to learn about the mix move, and of course we are very familiar with the GLAC framework. And I'd like to share with you the next case called Big Mile. Next slide, please. Some of you are probably familiar with the Lean and Green Europe program. It is the biggest multimodal program on reducing carbon emissions. There's more than 550 companies involved in 13 countries in Europe, and plus Canada. And the program started with a relative reduction of what should be 20%. Here's listed 30%. And the companies involved said, well, we want to comply to the Paris Climate Agreement, and that means we have to shift to absolute reduction. And within the Lean and Green community, this means that there was a need for data from worldwide supply chains. There was also a need for actual data and data coming from all modes. Well, how to continue that? Then the Dutch government, which has a special climate fund, was willing to give financial support to make sure that the tool which was to be developed was made available to the entire logistics industry. And for doing that, it should be automated, and the decision was made, let's create a web-based tool. And we were very lucky that within the Lean and Green community, we did not have to start from scratch, because Connect was involved in the CoFred program. And in CoFred, there was an algorithm already developed about how to take care of the calculation of emissions. And on top of this algorithm, there were other algorithms added from the Connect and Lean and Green Europe community. And that was the basis of the foundation of Big Mile. And then we had to answer some questions, since the core of Big Mile is based on a public algorithm. We published all this information available, but it was also very clear that we could not continue on getting public money. So the company had to change into a commercial company to make sure that enough investments were created to make sure that innovation in product and services could happen. So we did a check with the community. Are you willing to make use of a service of a commercial company in calculating your carbon footprinting? And we were very happy that a lot of the involved companies were saying, yes, we understand this, it should be run on a commercial base. But for us, it is also important that the public goal behind CoFred, behind Connect, behind Lean and Green, is to improve the, or to reduce the footprint in the entire logistics community is still taken care of. And that is the reason why there's a public part in Big Mile and a commercial part. The public part focusing on the well-being of the society, and the commercial part in improving the competitive advantage of the logistics companies. And to tell you what actually Big Mile is doing, it's my pleasure to give the floor to Jacques Paul, the CEO of Big Mile.
Thank you, Nico. I hope you can all hear me well. I have the pleasure now to talk a little bit more about Big Mal. We are leading Big Mal now since in the middle of 2020. So that was the moment that we started to become commercial, and it has been a great journey so far. We now have already quite some customers. I think over 200 users in our platform. And I'm proud to have a team of about 10 people working both on the commercial side to reach the market, but also to further add value to our clients by adding more functionality and more technology into our platform. So what our platform does, it basically is a carbon footprinting platform that calculates and helps you to optimize your CO2 footprint. And Lean and Green members, Nico was already talking about Lean and Green. They can use basically our tool as part of the Lean and Green program to help them calculating their CO2 and also to find ways to do things better and to make their plans for the upcoming future. Next slide, please. So it helps you to calculate and allocate your CO2 emissions. And then basically you can therefore also check whether you are aligned with the rules and regulations that are out there, and there are many, and they're changing as well. So you want to keep track of that as well. You want to set your goals. We help them setting the goals and also keeping track of them. It really helps you also in your define your business strategy on becoming more sustainable and drive your reporting in case that is necessary for your clients or for authorities. Next slide, please. And of course, we don't have the time to really go into the tool itself. Would love to do that and would love to give you a demo, but we try to keep it simple on slides on what we do. Big Mal is like many other tools. You can calculate your emissions, but what we have seen is if you Google on the internet, you can find many information about that. So the calculation itself is not rocket science, but you need to make sure that you make it easy for clients to start working with it. And what we see in the market is that yes, you have the ambassadors, and I think there are some ambassadors in this call today that already have started working on calculating their emissions early and are continuing doing that. But there are many out there that haven't started yet. And what we see is that for them the sense of urgency is not yet high enough, and they are really afraid of the complexity of starting to do so. They don't know where to start. They find it complex, and so they rather wait. So what we try to do is we try to make it easy for them so that they can start easily and also have a lot of value when they start. So not only so we have to do, but you also get some results out of it. You make your supply chain better by using a tool like Big Mal. Which brings me to the next topic. It's not just calculating CO2 or other emissions. One slide back, please. I wasn't finished with this slide. Thank you. This is not just calculating. We really help our clients to improve it. We have great visualization there and simulation options. So we recently launched a new version of our platform that includes all kinds of scenario functionality to work on different modalities, change your routes, to use different engines or fuel types. It all helps you directly to say, okay, what if I need to achieve my goals on sustainability? What should I do? Where should I invest in electrical vehicles? What is really helping my company and the society to move forward? Very important in the world of logistics is that we are all very connected. So everyone who is active in supply chain deals with partners. So if you want to have a good view on your total supply chain and the emissions in that supply chain, you will always be confronted with the situation that you have to share your information with others, with your clients, with your subcontractors, or the subcontractors with yourself. We were thinking about how to make that easy. And therefore, we created a platform, and that platform basically allows you to share it with your partners. You decide that yourself, but you can, by a click on the button, you basically can share it with your client if you want to. And they only will see your information, their own information, so not the ones of the competitors or other clients you have. Another challenge that we see is data quality. Of course, the leaders will have a lot of good information, a lot of good data that they can use to calculate CO2. But many clients are really struggling with that, or have parts of the chain where the data quality is not that great. So what we have basically been doing with them is that we help them in all types of quality. So whether you are a starter, you have a bronze level, to a gold plus level, where you can basically have the fuel consumption per route or per trip that you've done. Then of course you have a very high quality, and then you can measure very accurate what kind of emissions you have. Next slide, please. Other things that our clients struggle with, there are many standards, and we just were, for instance, listening to the GLEC story. There are many out there, and I know that we're working towards more standardization, but at the moment companies still struggle with that. So what we've done is we made it compliant with many different standards. I'm saying compliant. Certification, for instance, with GLEC is in process. We are preparing that at the moment. But our clients can basically choose what they want to use when they have to report, or with whom they want to do business with. We're ready for carbon accounting, so that if you for instance have your accountant that wants to check the CO2 emissions and wants to basically undersign the annual report, we help them doing that. So you don't have to have an expensive accountant coming in to do the calculation for you. They can prove, or they can rely on the tool. They can rely on the outputs. And the same with in preparation of CO2 pricing. If you have to put the emissions per shipment on your invoice, your client wants to know whether it really is accurate, whether reliable what you basically tell them. So you want to have proof and evidence of that. So this carbon accounting helps you doing that. CO2 pricing, I think it speaks for itself. We are ready for everything which is going to happen in the market on that topic. And last but not least, we're talking about a lot of data that we basically have in the platform. So it needs to be very secure. Otherwise, companies will never use it. And we're basically our methodology, our approach is the user decides what happens with the data. As Big Mile, I cannot see their detailed data. I cannot see how they move a product from A to B. I only can see some metadata, but I can't see any details. And that's what I also want to keep like that. I want to keep the user having control of their data. And if they want to share it with their clients, it's them who have to decide. So we build a very impressive data security structure around our platform. Next slide, please. But we're not ready. I think we already have a great platform, but we think we can even do much more. And like I was already saying, we store metadata, so we don't store confidential individual lanes or individual shipments. What we do store is really about metadata and about aggregate level of information. So that, for instance, policymakers can see what the supply chain, the logistical flows are from region to region, from zip code to zip code, in which sectors, which modalities. So they also can play with the kind of measures that you want to take from a policy point of view. We are preparing the end-to-end carbon accounting. And what do we mean with that? We want to be ready for a situation that for every step in your supply chain, you need to measure the CO2. So from production to the final consumer, like a VAT, we want to be ready for that. And last but not least, and which is maybe the most important topic, is really about connectivity. We want to make it as easy as possible for our clients to be connected to Big Mile with APIs and all those kind of things. That is one of the highest priorities that we currently are working on. Yeah. So next slide, please. And maybe before I forget, of course, we also are very actively in our roadmap focusing on internationalization at the moment. So we are reaching out to the markets. We're building up our sales force, and so that we have local access to our clients. We already have some, and also international. So we are a Dutch company. We do not have only Dutch companies as clients, but our customer base is really rapidly increasing, which is great. And here are some of our full users. And on the next slide, you see some examples of users that are part of the Lean and Green program and also are using our platform. So in total, I think we're about 200 users as we speak, and rapidly increasing. So it's great. I think that's about it that I wanted to share with you. I've also seen quite some questions in the chat box, but I wasn't able to follow them all. I will look at them individually later on. But
yeah, no problem. Thank you very much for the presentation. And now we are a little bit back on schedule. So then I even put myself some comments there, so then you can go through if you wish. And now it's the time for me to introduce Andreas Nesserter, that is leading one of the main work packages in BOOSTLOG. So then, Andreas, please.
Yes. So also a welcome from my side. Now, after the interesting presentations, we want you to work a bit with us together. So don't relax. You have to work in the next 5 to 10 minutes with us, and then Fernando will do, I guess, the ending. So I'm responsible in BOOSTLOG for the identification and prioritization of the research and innovation gaps. And on the next slide, you can see our main objective for the EU is to define high potential contributions to EU policy objectives that need to be prioritized in future R&I actions. So it's a complex sentence, as you can hear, but the main idea behind that is we are looking for which areas in logistics will pop up and will be more relevant in future than they are today. And these can be completely new areas which were never worked on, but also this can be some areas which we worked already for years, but there were no real outcomes, no real impact. And to do that in a quite structured way, we want to develop a holistic framework for the identification. Carolina already gave an insight in her presentation. And of course, because we won't do it on our own, we want to collect input and feedback from project partners, ALICE members, and external stakeholders. And this meeting is the first in a row where we want to collect this input from you. Next slide, please. How we want to do it, and especially what we want to do today, I will try to explain on this side, is that we are talking about logistic clouds, which are mainly logistic topics, concepts, ideas, what is currently going on in logistics and what will be, let's say, the new hot topics. And as a first step, we want to identify them. We have already a huge collection based on existing projects, on studies, on trend reports, and there is already a lot of stuff available. And we want later on check with you our current list of those topics. Additionally, we are also collecting external influencing factors, which are societal trends, economical drivers, key enabling technologies, so everything which is popping up around the logistic topics, and they will, on the one hand, they could drive a specific topic. On the other hand, they could even enable it if we're talking about the key enabling technologies. And out of this, we want to build some kind of a research map, which, yeah, I think also Carolina mentioned, where we do the mapping later on to see where are activities where we need to work on. This exactly will be the second step. So after we identified the topics and also the external influencing factors, and perhaps we can see which factor is driving which topic will become more important in future. We will combine our work with what Carolina presented. So we will map the existing projects, the existing outcome and impacts of projects, of initiatives with this map so that later on we can see, okay, those hot topics are already covered by several projects, or the other way, and this is what we're exactly looking for, there are some hot topics and no projects are currently working on them. And as the third step, we would then try to derive recommendations out of those findings. So if we see there is a new hot topic and this is driven by a new key enabling technology, and it will become more important because it's one way to one of the EU objectives or regulations, then we will try to write a recommendation and tell the European Commission that this topic seems to be a hot topic and they should think in future about doing some funding, some calls, some activities which would cover this topic or enable this topic so that it can be realized faster. The next slide, please. Today, we will focus on the first step. So it's about the logistic clouds concepts and the topics. I already told you we did a huge literature research and we collected the outcome of other projects, and we have a quite huge collection of those logistic topics. And as soon as I stop presenting, we will switch to a Slido presentation where you can see all of those topics. And we need your help today to do a rating. So we want to know which, in your point of view, from your point of view, are the most relevant topics in future. If you think a very important topic is missing, you can also write it in the comments. But today, it would be really helpful if you concentrate on doing a rating, and if you tell us which topics do you think are the hot topics in logistics, and they should be definitely investigated in more detail. In between or afterwards, we will also do we already did it, an identification of the external influencing factors. Also there, a lot of work has been done. We are not doing it again and again. We collect the input which is already there, and later on or after today, you will also see those external influencing factors. Next slide, please. And why we are doing it, and I already told it, that we are looking for this clustering of hot topics. And one idea, and we will see in the next months if this idea will work out, is that we are collecting the topics, do a rating of the topics. This is what we'll do today, and that later on we will ask also for your input to find relations between topics and those external influencing factors. I already made this example, and later on, I will give you another example, but if we see there is a relation between one of those topics and one of those, I don't know, technology enablers, let's pick here this row, which is just an example. There will be concrete technologies, of course, named in the real matrix. And we'll look at topic B, then we think there is a strong relation between those topics, and we should have a look at it. If it's a red cell, like here, we would, like in the first row and the last column, I guess then we would say, okay, this topic has no relation with this key enabling technology, with this objective, and so on and so on. On the next slide, there should be the example, right? Where we say, okay, and this is really a very easy, a very small example. We are still working on better ones. But if we say, we see there is a correlation between a societal trend, here it's the sustainable society, and perhaps a logistic concept, perhaps better consolidation and bundling of goods, we can say there is a link between the sustainable society needs a more efficient transport in logistics, and this can be realized via consolidation and bundling of goods. So there could be a link between sustainable society and consolidation of goods. And in the second part, we try to identify the same, a similar correlation between the key enabling technology and the logistic concepts. Here we say, okay, data sharing protocols could help to realize the consolidation, because if you know what's coming and you know where it should go, before it is at your warehouse, you could better plan and coordinate the transports. And in the end, there would be something like what we have written here in this sentence: the drive to a more sustainable society will require that within the logistics sectors, further consolidation, bundling of goods will be achieved. The development of data sharing protocols will enable the development, and so on. And this could already be, let's say, a very draft recommendation. I think the real recommendations will be more complex, but just to give you an idea what we mean with there can be links between external factors and those logistic concepts. And now I would like to switch to the Slido. I think it's the next, yes. There you can see the Slido. You can join either by scanning the QR code, and I think Fernando already copied the link into the chat. And there, if you want to type in, you don't need to retype all of this stuff. You just need to put in the first letters, and then you see the selection of what we see here. And again, it would be really helpful not just to add new ones. It would be really helpful if you say, from my point of view, those topics are the most relevant. And we already have identified a lot, as you can see here. And I guess that there are some interesting ones. They are also all not on the same level. I think if we pick just one out, there we have the resilient supply chains. I think this, especially having the COVID situation in mind, or also today, like it was already mentioned, the problems in the Suez Canal. I think this could be one interesting topic driven by Corona, for example. We see other ones where you can also see data sharing, of course, is one of the top topics, I think, already for the last years. Other topics we found out is now it's moving that fast. So it's for example, the hyper-connected hubs, where it's about also as part of perhaps of the physical internet concept that we connect even more our warehouses, our distribution centers with each other. And we have some quite let's say traditional topics, the automated operations, autonomous operations, where of course it's not only about autonomous driving on public streets, but it can also have a huge influence on the operation within warehouses, so that we are more and more using robots, using some other autonomous systems which can help to get a better overview on the complexity in logistics.
Yeah, Andreas, I see people are joining. So if you want to join, I see many people have not joined the discussion or pooling. If you can directly go into the chat, and then you see the direct link or the link to the website slido.com and the event name BOOSTLOG.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Having a look to the time. I don't know, Fernando, if we should keep the Slido open and people can use it while you do the ending of the meeting, or what would you prefer?
Sure, we can do that. I do the closing of the meeting, and just a minute before the closing, we directly go and see the results. So
Perfect.
Thank you. Yep. I wanted to thank all the speakers today. I think we had very different points of view, but very clear insights on what we are working on and which are the futures that we are going to develop through the BOOSTLOG project. I think we had very good recommendations from Professor McKinnon on areas that we need to explore further in the interviews with the people that we are going to interview and with the experts, and also giving grounds on how we can move to create a framework for higher impact of research and innovation results. And then also, I think it was clear on the examples, what we mean with the implementation cases. Actually, we are indeed much more interested, or what we are going to promote more is not the actual solutions, but the process in which these solutions were built based on research and innovation results. So there, what we are also willing is to open up for you. If you have either research and innovation projects with great outcomes that are close to the market, but still are in a pre-commercial phase, TRL 6-7, that you share this with us, because then we will integrate into our knowledge platform. We also are particularly interested in these implementation cases, so we can learn from those, saying, okay, how we can move, we move from research and innovation results to policies, to market solutions, and find out which were the elements to make that success. And just to invite you to follow us through the ALICE website or through the ALICE LinkedIn group, and also the developments what we will be sharing frequently through this type of webinars. And there, I only wanted to thank at the end Jianjin Li, that is the person that was incorporated in ALICE in January, that have made all this happen today in a so nice way. Thank you, Jianjin. And
pleasure.
It has been great. And then just this is the result of what you said, and for us this is the main priorities, or where we will start working more intensively in the next steps of the BOOSTLOG. Still will be open, so then you can work on this afterwards, at least for the rest of today. So thank you very much, everybody. Again, thank you all the consortium partners for this great start of the project, and looking forward. The project is 3 years, so then we will have many moments in which we will connect on this one and share with you the outcomes and results. Thank you very much, and have a great day, great weekend. Bye bye.
Bye bye.